Hello. Today we're going to continue on with our quadratics review and review solving an equation. I have highlighted four main ways. Solving by finding square roots we'll look at first. You can solve by factoring, which is why we reviewed factoring before. Completing the square is a method, and quadratic formula is the final method. Okay, when you solve a quadratic equation, of course a quadratic equation is any equation that has the highest degree is power 2. So that generally means there are two solutions. Now sometimes there is only one solution, and that typically occurs when the solution is 0. Sometimes there's no real solution. So in Algebra 1 it's possible we said no solution, no real solution. There are solutions, but that gets into a topic you'll learn in Algebra 2 regarding imaginary numbers. So if you notice these first four equations, they contain the a value and the c value in a quadratic equation. 2x squared minus 98. There's no b value. There's no term with just an x on it. 3n squared plus 12. 27 minus y squared. 1/2 x squared plus 3. So when we see that, we can solve it like a linear equation where we isolate x squared, get it down to a point, and then we take the square root of both sides. So let's start on this first one. Okay, we're going to isolate x squared, so let's add 98 to both sides. So I have 2x squared equals 98. We're going to divide by 2. That would be 49. And then now that you're down to x squared, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to go like this. Take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 49 is 7. But there are two solutions because when you take the negative 7 and square, you also get 49. So we're going to write that as plus or minus 7. So we would write it as a positive, negative. We would say plus or minus. You can also write x equals 7, x equals negative 7. But I want you to be familiar with that notation, plus or minus 7. Okay, next one. We are going to do the same thing. I recognize I can solve by square roots, so I am going to start. I'm going to take away 12 from both sides. That will give me 3n squared. 12 minus 12 is 0, so keep going. Divide by 3, divide by 3. N squared is equal to 0. So now I can take the square root of both sides. So square root of 0 is just 0. So this would be a case where we have one solution. So we won't have a positive or negative 0. It's just n equals 0. Okay, if you want to pause and try the next two, go ahead and do that. And then come back and we can check over answers. All right, I'm going to take away 27 from both sides. That will give me negative y squared equals negative 27. Divide off that negative 1. Y squared equals positive 27. And I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, we would get a decimal here. In fact, if I did the square root of 27, I get approximately 5.196. So I want us to simplify this radical. So I want to break this down into two factors where one is a perfect square and one is not, so that I can take the square root of the perfect square as I write my answer. So when I look at this, I'm going to come over to the side because I'm out of room. It shouldn't be y squared, it should just be y. So 27 breaks down into 1 times 27, 3 times 9. I want to go with 3 times 9 because the 9 is the perfect square. So I'm going to simplify 27, square root of 27, into square root of 9, square root of 3. And then the square root of 9 is 3. So I can take the square root of 9 and write that as 3. The square root of 3 is a decimal. So I don't want to take the square root of it. I just want to bring it down. And so this now says 3 times the square root of 3. So my answer is y equals 3 times the square root of 3. Now, remember, it's also positive or negative. Okay, so 3 square root of 3 has to be written as plus or minus 3 square root of 3. So I'm going to ask you to write your answers in simplest radical form like this. This is considered exact. There's no rounding. It's really similar to when we reduce a fraction. We would take 5/10 and reduce it to 1/2. We will also take radicals or square roots and simplify them down to lowest terms. Now, if I get a perfect square, great. You take the square root of it and you get the value. If the number you're taking the square root of is not a perfect square, then we have to go through this breaking down process. Okay, last one here. Take away 3, take away 3. So I have 1/2 x squared equals -3. You can either divide both sides by 1/2. You also, when you have a fraction, you can multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Sometimes that's a little easier because then you don't have to actually think about the division or use your calculator. So 1/2 times 2 is just 1. So I get x squared equals, now I can just do -3 times 2 and I get -6. I'm ready to take the square root. Now, square root of -6. Domain error. So, or you might have a calculator that says no real solution. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where there is a solution. We would have to write it as an imaginary number, which you'll learn in Algebra 2. So what we're going to say right now is that there is no real solution. No real solution. Okay. All right, that is that is solving by square roots. So I'm going to stop the video here and then have a second video where we pick up with zero product property and we solve by factoring.